7 years. 7 years is the timeline Blizzard has set for World of Warcraft's future, and appeal to those who were burned in the past to come home. In this video, we'll look at what that entails, along with the interviews from the devs and the extra knowledge I gained off camera. Is it enough to bring players home again? Before that, a word from our sponsor. Now, ballers, we all know how hard it is to figure out how to get your class absolutely crispy, especially if you're a returning player, and U.GG has you covered. For the Race to World First, which starts next week, they have built a tool specifically so you can follow Echo and figure out exactly what spec, talents, gear, everything they were using on a boss by boss basis. So if you're going into that new raid and you're not sure whether you need to twist your talents ever so slightly to be absolutely optimal, you can check what the best in the world is doing. This will be going live from Tuesday, and you'll be able to check immediately to see exactly if you need to change anything about your character to be totally optimal. But that's not all. U.GG gathers all the information from the top players, so you can quickly, at a glance, figure out what is the best for your spec. What talents are people running in Mythic Plus, in raiding, whatever it might be, specific dungeons, and then you can see their stat breakdowns as well, compared to everybody playing the game, what stats you should be going for, what enchants, what gems, all that kind of good stuff is fully available at a glance at U.GG. So thanks to U.GG for sponsoring this video, and I recommend you check it out, especially if you're coming back to try things out. Blizzcon 2023 gave some space to a lot of their flagship games, but it's no secret it was majorly WoW focused. It's no secret that the other Blizzard IPs have been under heavy fire for the last few months, and with Heroes of the Storm and StarCraft not even a glimmer in their eye, Blizzard needed a big win to get back on track. Chris Metzen's announcements were not for the current WoW player base. They were targeted at players such as myself and many others who were so burned by BFA and Shadowlands that they uprooted and moved on to greener pastures. A signal was shot into the sky that they were ready to correct those mistakes. Dragonflight has been well received, but it also exposed a great weakness in the World of Warcraft foundations. While they did remove all the mandatory chores that had broken the backs of players for 5 years, it revealed that World of Warcraft contained very little content for players actually wanted to do for fun. It also showed that the constant stream of temporary content like Island Expeditions and Torghast, etc., that were never built to survive beyond the expansion had left a gaping hole of content when the game no longer evolved around simply gaining some arbitrary resource to improve power. This was something that we spoke about during our trip to the campus last year.
We're going to keep running this game for years and years and decades to come. Can we really just keep adding new permanent systems every couple of years forever? No. And so I think, that's what led to some of the class pruning philosophy that went into Warlords. It's what led it to kind of pulling back in some areas, but also the idea that we needed to be able to make things that were not permanent, that we could go deeper, focus them on a single expansion, have them be the hallmark of that expansion, but they weren't going to add to the ongoing complexity.
This, along with modernizing the game's approach to how it treats its players, is what the War Within, Midnight, and The Last Titan is here to solve. The greatest shift in Blizzard I saw from BlizzCon was them going back to what they do best. Traditionally, and at their heights, Blizzard was known for looking at what other games had done, taking it, and then making it significantly better. This goes all the way back to such simple things like leveling. Until World of Warcraft, leveling was a pure mob grind, the accepted way of doing things in the MMO industry. They took the idea, they broke the mold and introduced the quest system, and it's utilized so many times over in modern day that it's now considered the norm. Many of the standout features of the War Within follow that model. Warbands, including account-wide reputation, shared banks and resources, etc., are simply commonplace in games today. Old ideas such as Pathfinder, alt taxation are antiquated and unfun. Delves sound very similar to fractals from Guild Wars 2, a system that has worked extremely well for them because their audience needed something different than dungeons to fit their playstyle. I admit, while watching the deep dive, not knowing that Blizzard was clearly pointing their camera right at me for reactions, that as Ian announced all these changes, I was of course happy, and also angry. As me and Ian had fought for years to get these changes into the game, and that stubbornness always pushed back. So it made sense for me to ask him how they arrived at this.
Over the years, me and you have logged heads a few times about a few things, and then today you 180'd nearly everything we've thought about over the last few years. What's going on? And like, this is a dramatic shift, going to like account focus, the whole thing.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, it's what I laid out on the panel today. It's a mix of, we said with the technology, but we made the technology get there. It really is letting go of old stubbornness.
Yeah.
It's something we've been talking about, I think, since midway through Shadowlands, certainly not before Shadowlands, but midway through onwards. A mix of seeing reception to Shadowlands, a mix of also seeing how the modern player base played Classic over the course of like 2019, 2020, that made us kind of just rethink all these assumptions about how WoW should be and what was integral to WoW versus what needed to evolve, what needed to adapt to the way players were looking to game in the modern age. And so I think, for a long time, a lot of these character investment philosophies were the byproducts, were handed down from my forebears, from the people who trained me, from the original leads.
Exactly. You came into a lot of rules that were established.
Yeah. And it was like, your job as game director, Ian, is to safeguard this tradition, do it well. And so taking a step back and being like, well, no, what if the tradition's wrong now? What if the tradition was right 20 years ago but needs to change today? That can be a hard conclusion to come to, but we're certainly there now.
What was the first domino to fall? I'm really curious, because today a lot fell. Yeah. It was like, okay, we're getting rid of not only the account, we're going more account focus instead of the character focus, but we're also dropping like taxing you on moving resources around. Like all these very established things are happening, and it felt like one thing fell, and it's like, let's look at everything here. This no longer makes sense. This no longer makes sense. And it doesn't fit together. So was it a case of that?
Yeah, I think it was, ultimately. It was asking the question of, are these principles actually making our players happier? Who are they serving? Or if we are honoring some vision, some set of values that we hold dear as developers, but it's alienating our players, who is that good for?
Yeah.
So it's not us, and it's certainly not them. And so I think looking at the data, hearing the feedback from not just our community, but also ourselves, members of the team who all play alts as well, that, the focus really, I think quality time is something that is a through line through all of this. We're trying to respect players' time, but doing that is not just, about what we do in an individual character. It's about making sure that as much of the time that you choose to spend in our world feels like high value to you, and not busy work, not wasting the time, so that you can get to the stuff that you enjoy in the hours that you have left. And so it's that, the product of that set of realizations, I think probably started us seriously down this path 2.5 years ago. But then we ran into, as I mentioned, a bunch of technical challenges where it's like, okay, you could see the piecemeal movement in these directions of more things, unlocking on vendors and being mailable to alts and so forth. But the actual solution required, expansion level work to deliver.
Blizzard's stubbornness has been a regular topic on my channel for years, and it's a fine moment to see them look at what's happening in the modern sphere and realize that they are not the young kid on the block anymore, changing the rules and being the boisterous ones, but instead becoming the old man, being stuck in a rut while everyone else has moved on. A word that was thrown around a lot during the What's Next panel with Morgan Day was Evergreen. Going back to the mention of temporary content like warfronts, class halls, etc., is now a move to create content that is everlasting and should fill out those gaping holes that chore removal has left behind. Combined with the shift of allowing solo players to obtain full end boss heroic loot is a welcome change. The salty player who believes they earned their gear more because they did X instead of Y content is not only never going to change, but it should be ignored. What another player has doesn't affect you in any way, and it's not the best items in the game regardless. Just another path for a player to go on and have fun with. I mentioned that delves sound like Guild Wars 2 fractals, but until we see them, we can't possibly know for sure. For now, and with a lot of these features, we wait and see on their function. But it does bring up a concern many players had about the 3 expansion announcement, which is that the fear is that it's a cash grab. Most features will be in the War Within, and Midnight and the Last Titan will just bring more zones and stories rather than the usual expansion systems that we see.
I've seen questions raised on the internet and elsewhere. Like,
yeah, the skeptics are out in force at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, is this like shrinkflation? Like
Yes.
how you get fewer chips in your bag of chips?
Yeah, you're
or
just trying to push it
crisps.
out to sell an expansion 6 months quicker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, no, these are expansions, right?
Exactly.
War Within has 4 zones and 8 dungeons and a raid and new levels. And we're not going to talk much in detail, but Midnight, I can say, we'll have 4 zones and dungeons and a raid. Like, these are expansions as you've come to know them. And we're just going to, not have gaps. And we're going to be ambitious and purposeful as we unfold the story.
Ian goes on to say that the 1.5-year goal for expansion release is more due to the growing development team. Certainly after their acquisition of Proletariat and having some of the team work on the next expansion, while the other team continues to push current content and content release, will be similar to what we have seen in Dragonflight, which overall has been faster than ever. Following the opening ceremony, I tweeted that they might not have called it WoW 2, but that's the vibe I was getting. Many didn't understand how I thought that, so let's dive into that a bit. The Worldsoul Saga is Blizzard's signal that they are changing a lot of how the game is presented. This is going to be far more story-focused than ever before. After experiencing the smiles and tears that FF14's story has given me, and shown millions of gamers just how good an MMO story can be, this is obviously a welcome change, and probably, in my opinion, the biggest challenge Blizzard has ever given itself. Storytelling in WoW, in my opinion, has always been its weakest point. Characters coming and going seemingly at random, powerful characters like Khadgar just not being involved when clearly we would turn to them for help, a giant sword sticking into the planet yet no one ever mentions it, and some of their most compelling storytelling is hidden in books and novels you have to buy outside of the game. This in turn leads to players not really caring about the actual story, but more giving a star rating to the cutscenes when they're released. Shooting a laser at N'Zoth is met with sighs and laughs, rather than a resounding cheer. Blizzard has a lot to do in order to stick the landing here. I dived into 10.2 to see how their storytelling was being done in its latest iteration. The much more frequent in-game cutscene use was a welcome change. Always skippable for those uninterested, but a skip current dialogue button would be welcome for people who read faster than the voice actors. On that note, the quantity of voice actors is massively increased, and they're of a very, very high quality. Where the game still suffers, though, is pacing. Having a major villain from the launch of the game, Viranoth, change her mind, swap teams, and be besties with the new team within 3 minutes of storytelling is nothing short of poor. It's not going to allow people to care about these moments when they're so mindlessly rushed through it, and including much needed depth and backstory to the characters in the latest novel isn't going to fill that gap for the majority of players who just won't see it. Similarly, having important main story elements stuck behind renown quests is no good, especially for those who play WoW seasonally, which is the current content model of WoW. The player having to sit and watch several cutscenes while lacking that precursor context is not good enough to get the player up to speed and invested. Side content should expand some characters, add more fullness to their story, but not be integral parts of the main story overall. When I was talking to Ian about this, he made it very clear that the story team is both excited and nervous about this new challenge.
From what we've seen in the past where expansions have been all self-contained, one and done sort of scenarios, how has it been internally with like seemingly now a 7-year-ish plan that has a very clear and distinct actually beginning, middle and end with War Within and then Nightmare and then Last Titan? Has that been really comfortable to work with? Like, okay, we have a beginning and we have an end, and it's not a case of sitting around a table every year and going, okay, are we going to the Dragon Isles next time? Or are we going to space? What are we doing?
It's partly comfortable, partly terrifying, right? I mean, certainly pulling back the, like, because we're making a commitment.
Yes.
We are, and there's aspects of this that now we can't change. We're going to have to work around. If we realize there's some challenges with the ideas we have, if we get feedback, if we get new ideas along the way, we're going to have to fit that to the structure that we've laid out. At the same time, yes, certainly, knowing for sure this is where we're going, this is where we're going to be, aids us in both planning for the future, but I think building richer worlds and stories today, because we can foreshadow, we can plant the little seeds for things that we know will make sense, as opposed to at times in the past, frankly, doing what seemed cool at the moment, and then, asking ourselves, well, what do we do next?
It's
and then
a novel versus YouTube shots is what it feels like. It's like, this is a really cool cutscene. But then, we talked about the world not reflecting it and where's it
Yeah.
going. But now, well, it will reflect because we're already building the next world.
My personal feeling on this is I'm more than willing to come home. I've been playing Dragonflight every season, but I'm still lacking that sense of satisfaction. As soon as the game devolves into M+ grind or Mythic Raid grinding for char improvements, I've turned away rather than be fully invested. And honestly, all too often, that has come far too quickly. The 7-year plan, though, it has me intrigued. On paper, everything seems to be good and is moving in the right direction. Their focus on players being happy with hero talent names rather than the functionality is a really good move, and it's probably what Covenant should have been. The problem is, they really need to stick the landing. If the storytelling is poor or rushed, paced wrong, then it won't make a difference if we're doing this over 3 expansions or 1 expansion in a different setting that we're used to. It'll just be the same thing. The 3-day early access for $90 is an obvious business move and one that I severely dislike. While Ian tried to justify it, I hate it. This is clearly a predatory business model that preys on people having to watch their favorite streamer or their friends playing 3 days early and feel the need to pay twice as much for the game than if they didn't 3 days early, despite the fact that it shouldn't provide any actual tangible benefit. It's something that's a black stain over the game right now, and everything that's good about what we're hearing is going to be covered by this. I understand that this is now an industry standard, such as microtransactions and all the things we've fought against for years, and it's probably here to stay. I just wish it wasn't there. I'm really excited about the future of WoW. Everything I saw at BlizzCon was amazing. All the people I talked to were so excited and so happy about what's coming home, and maybe it's time to come home. Honestly, I would like to come home.